Hello, Apps here from Dimp Digital. Welcome to my review of the Order 1886. As always, let me start with my cards on the table. I guess the only real thing of note here regarding the Order is that I have heard nothing but negative things about this game, and although I don't think that's influenced my final grading of this, it's worth disclosing that basically everything I've seen or heard or read has been negative about the Order 1886. As I say, it's not going to influence the way I've scored it, but you know, I've heard very little when it comes to positive views on this game. It's a PlayStation exclusive, so obviously it's been played on the PS4 itself, but that's it for the cards on the table. Let's crack on with the review itself. The biggest splash that the Order made when it was being previewed and before it came out was that visuals, you know, it looks like almost like a film, people were saying, and don't get me wrong, it's a great looking console game. It seamlessly transfers from cutscenes into gameplays, and the graphics do not take a hit, and I'm not denying that this isn't an impressive feat, but it is a little bit dull. You can see that it's a very misty grey version of London, and as good as it does look and as good as it transfers seamlessly into the gameplay, it did not blow me away, and I don't know why they've tried to get this film feel by cropping the top and bottom of it. You know, we're here to play a video game, not a bloody film. And maybe going back to the dull and grey criticisms, you know, it is set in London, which typically, for whatever reason, is seen as a very dull and horrible place, especially back in that time zone. So maybe they were trying to capture that part of London, but it just didn't switch me on. The concept of the Order is actually pretty interesting. You know, it's set in an alternate history in London, as I mentioned. Technology is a bit different. It's come forward a little bit more. So in 1886, there's a lot more technology there was in our actual timeline, and also the wars that humanity have gone through. The main one that's taking place is against these half-breeds, or lycans as they're called, and they're half human and half beast, and you take control of a chap named Sir Galahad, who's a member of the Order of the Knights. They're there to protect London and other parts of the world against, you know, anything negative, or against maybe these lycans. To add some extra spice, there's also some anti-government rebels that are causing headaches and ruining the show. So, you know, there's different enemies you'll be fighting. You'll be fighting the half-breeds, or maybe these rebels as you work your way through. And I like the whole idea of what they were going for here. You know, there's a lot of historical references, you know, that have taken place, and there are historical figures that pop up in an alternative form. The fact that there's new and interesting tech potentially to experiment with, you know, had me, you know, quite excited to try this out. But despite the good setting and the good idea, the Order does not deliver on the story front. I found it disappointing, and I'm not going to spoil what happens, but you know, I just feels like there's a wasted potential, because the actual concept, I feel it could have been done a lot better, and something very interesting could have been made out of this. So the visuals and the presentation, it's decent, you know, it's good, you know, can't deny that it's good, but as I said, the colour kind of detracts it a little bit for me. Story is poorly executed, but what about the gameplay? Does the Order 1886 deliver an enthralling and exciting cover-based shooter? And the answer is absolutely not. It is a massive letdown, in my opinion. It is a cover shooter, and the system that's implemented is average at best, and the actual shooting, oh my god, it feels so weak, so weak. You do not feel the weight or the impact on the enemies. The enemies themselves don't have any kind of real intelligence. They can't just seem like they're respawning, going to the same hiding spots, and you just got to pop out and shoot them, rinse and repeat. And the gameplay actually feels like an afterthought, and to make it worse is that you actually spend, well, as bad as the combat is, and you know, it's not that enjoyable, you'll spend a lot of the time not engaged in combat. So you'll be walking around, or walking towards your next destination, which I must add is very linear. There's no free roam aspect as you follow a set route. Now when you're walking, the game decides whether you can draw your gun or not. So you know exactly when an enemy battle is about to occur, because Sir Galahad will draw his gun. So any kind of tension or surprise is taken away completely. Oh yeah, and it decides when you can and can't sprint. So in some cases you have to walk at a snail's pace, in others you can run, and I've got no idea why they've designed it that way. Maybe they wanted you to take in the visuals and have a look around, but you know, not doing it that way, forcing you to walk when you can run in other areas and not be able to draw your gun is ridiculous. And what makes it worse is they've put NPCs around the areas that you walk through You can't draw your gun, so you can't scare them with that. And I thought, well, maybe you can wander over and interact with them in some way. Maybe they'll just say, "Oh, Sir Galahad," or something like that. Nope. They literally just stand there doing the same animation over and over again, and that's just lazy. You put them in there, do something with them, something that we can just sort of have that little moment in the game where we can interact with them, knock into them, or just get a bit of dialogue out of them. There's quick time events in the game as well, which surprisingly are actually probably one of the more interesting parts of the game, and are actually better implemented than in some other games. There's often at least 2 options for you to choose on your quick time event, and they're not just a single quick time event, they normally link on, and the action will dynamically shift depending on your choice. So you can play around with that and experiment, but there's only a handful of them in the game, so it's not that great of a feature. All in all, it's just not a very enjoyable or engaging experience, and the tragedy is that the story doesn't save its skin, which is criminal in my opinion. There were complaints about the game's length. Now personally, I didn't feel the game was too short, and maybe that's because I wasn't really enjoying myself, and that for me sums up the Order 1886 right there. If this was an enjoyable experience, I probably would have raised my eyebrow thinking it had ended a tad abruptly and a bit soon, but I was actually grateful that it was so brisk. It's not the shortest game I've ever played, and it's certainly not long, but in my opinion, having it at this kind of mid-range saves the Order from being a complete disaster. If this was a 15-hour game, that would have been absolute torture to play through, and I can't really recommend this game in good faith. It doesn't offer enough to you as a player, or it didn't offer enough to me as a player. Sure, the visuals look good, but we're here to play video games. The visuals look good in all the games these days. They all look good enough anyway. And this is just a classic case of presentation being hyped up and being focused on over the gameplay. And the result is a dull, run-of-the-mill shooter that would have been behind the times if it was released a decade ago. My official grading for the Order 1886 is ungraded. Thanks for your time, and ta-da.
The play is over, Galahad. Surrender yourself!
Raise your hands, now!
Raise your hands!
Hands up!
Gray,
Don't do this!
I said surrender!
Hands on your head!
You have betrayed our order! No one may escape the penalty!
You forget, Lord Chancellor. I'm as good as dead already.
Galahad!